Hi everyone, welcome to today's presentation on compassionate movement, how to find joyful movement in one's recovery. My name is Shivani and I'm one of the managers of mission initiatives here at the National Eating Disorders Association, and I'm so excited to welcome you all here. I'd like to take a brief moment before we get started to talk a little bit about the National Eating Disorders Association and the work that we do. NEDA is a nonprofit organization working to increase awareness of eating disorders, provide information and resources, advance research, and advocate for change. Through campaigns like Eating Disorders Awareness Week and through our Campus Warriors and Walks program, we're working to increase public understanding of these complex disorders. We also provide information and resources through the Grace Holland Cozine Resource Center, our toolkits, a screening tool which has helped over 1 million people, as well as through our educational programs like the Eating Disorders 101 presentation and webinars like this. Additionally, we invest in innovative research that helps to develop and further effective treatments and work in collaboration with other groups to improve policies and systems to prevent eating disorders and expand access to quality care. If you'd like to support our work and more programmings like this webinar, we appreciate any donations. This webinar is presented by Ali Beckman. As Alsana's Director of Clinical Nutrition and Movement Services, Ali is responsible for training dietitians in alignment with Alsana's adaptive care model and helping to maintain the quality and consistency of Alsana's nutrition and movement programs. Ali has extensive training in the treatment of avoidant and restrictive food intake disorder, ARFID, diabetes, and embodied recovery. She's also a certified intuitive eating counselor. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and I'll relay them to Ali at the end of the presentation during a time for questions and answers. Now I'll turn it on over to Ali. Please feel free to take it away, and thank you so much for being here.
Amazing. Thank you all for having me. Before I go ahead and share my screen and dive into the content we have for today, I have two personal disclaimers. The first one is that I am getting a slight head throat cold, and I have been talking all day. So I may have a scratchy voice throughout this. I may need to pause and take a few sips of water. Please bear with my voice, bear with my hydration status. Just trying to keep myself happy, healthy, safe. The second, if you can't tell, I'm actually in a hotel traveling to Alabama to visit one of our Alsana locations. They've been doing construction underneath me all day. So if you hear some banging, hopefully they're done by now. But if you hear some power tools, that is why. But if you all give me 1 minute, we are going to dive into what I, as a biased human who put this presentation together, believes to be a really exciting presentation. And so, like we said, we are going to spend the next chunk of time talking about movement, specifically how to find joyful movement in recovery and how to be compassionate with yourself as you potentially reintegrate exercise movement into your day-to-day. And so we have a few goals for today. One, we're going to talk about why exercise movement, and I'm going to pause for a second. You will likely hear me say exercise, movement, physical activity, all interchangeably. I know they may have different definitions for different people, but I am talking about the way in which we are choosing to intentionally move our bodies in the world. But we're going to talk about why movement can be really beneficial for folks recovering from an eating disorder. Put some definitions around what intentional and compassionate movement is. Look at the role of self-compassion and flexibility in the way we move our bodies. Looking at strategies for introducing mindful movement, and looking at tips and tricks for listening to your body and recognizing your body's limits. I am going to give a quick disclaimer as well. I saw one notification come down from the top for a chat, and now it's gone. As my slides are up, I will not be able to see the chat. Actually, it just came. Will you be sharing the recording? Okay. my ability to pay attention to the chat will come in and out. So, like we said, we'll save questions for the end. There will be a few parts of this presentation where I'm actually going to ask you all for thoughts, opinions, etc. Just so you know, those are only coming to the hosts of this Zoom, so it's not going to be blasted out to everyone. So your answers will be confidential to me and the NETA team. So we'll go ahead and dive in. First and foremost, I always like to remind folks that movement can be a really great tool for healing, physical, mental, emotional healing, when it is approached with flexibility, self-compassion, and mindfulness. For those of you that have heard me talk about movement before, this is something that I feel really passionate about because back 7, 8, 10 years ago, we as a field were actually pretty afraid of exercise for people with eating disorders. The feeling, I don't know if this was explicitly said, but the feeling was exercise is an eating disorder behavior. We do not condone it. When in reality, movement can be really, really beneficial for mental, emotional, physical, spiritual well being. And so I feel really excited that I've been able to see the field shift from a place of essentially exercise avoidance for folks with eating disorders to a place of being able to embrace it when it's done in a, like the slide says, mindful, flexible, and compassionate way. So we're going to dive in a little bit to the benefits. And there are a ton of them. I'm sure that I have not even listed them all here. But there are a ton of physical benefits and there are a ton of psychological benefits. We see that in the eating disorder population, and I'm going to put maybe a little mental asterisk here, saying when people are medically stable, nutritionally stable. When I say nutritionally stable, I mean hydrating appropriately, right? That we can see a ton of great physical benefits. So we see a reverse of any heart abnormalities. We can see improvements in bone strength, a decrease in blood pressure. We see increased like heart and lung strength, right? From a nutrition end, I always really emphasize that movement can also improve appetite and can support my hunger cues and feeling improved so that I'm feeling hungry every 2 to 4 hours when I should be eating, and can actually support and healing metabolism, which we know can be pretty compromised for folks that have an abnormal relationship with food. From the psychological end of things, we know that connection to our bodies can support in a reduction of body dissatisfaction. It can also increase mind-body connection. Again, I want to circle back to this slide when done in a mindful, flexible way. We see improvements in symptoms of depression and anxiety, improved sleep hygiene, improved mood, improved learning and memory, better quality of life. So again, when done properly and in a nourished, fed state, exercise can be a really like exponentially important tool for the healing process. And like I said, I want to take 1 second to kind of define the 3 buckets of presentations that we see when it comes to a relationship with exercise. The last is our like ultimate goal, right? Compassionate exercise. We want to support folks in enjoying the way that they move. We want it to feel like a nourishing or life-giving part of the day. And we want exercise to change based on whatever the heck is going on with your life, right? Whatever my current physical needs are, emotional needs, social needs, etc. And so when we talk about what compassionate exercise or movement is, we know that similar to your relationship with food, it may ebb and flow throughout the day or the week or the month based on everything else playing out in your life, right? And then we have two opposite ends of the spectrum, or maybe alternating ends of the spectrum, depending on the human experiencing them. But we see compulsive exercise as a presentation or relationship with exercise, which has a primary focus on burning calories. It can potentially be a form of punishment or a quote unquote natural consequence to eating, right? Maybe a way to actually hurt the body. And it oftentimes comes from a place of guilt or shame. And then we see avoidant exercise, which is really an avoidance of connecting to my body. This may come, like you see here, from a fear of judgment. I'm afraid of judging myself. I don't like how I feel when I perform, or fear of judgment from others. I know these are pretty limited definitions because I can't have a slide that includes every human's rationale for how and why they exercise. But if you all don't mind actually dropping into the chat where you're at right now in terms of your relationship with exercise, do you lean more towards the compulsive, avoidant, or compassionate side of things? Okay, I see one avoidant. Compassionate. Just got into it more. That's amazing. Compassion. Yes, this is super common. I was actually just running a group about avoiding exercise because I used to use it as a weapon. And now I'm almost fearful of engaging in exercise because it might get out of hand or I don't know how to make it compassionate. So definitely that ping pong between compulsive to avoidant. Oh, and yoga. Yeah. I am going to close my chat now, but I'll bring it back up when we have a different question for y'all. I'm actually really happy though to see that we're kind of all over the spectrum, right? We have some of each category. Okay, so we are about to hop into a lot of things about exercise, and I did not feel like I could rightfully do that without my potentially nerdy dietitian plug. But as we offer information or we talk about working to embrace exercise as a helpful tool in recovery, I can't do that without reminding everyone that it is so important to be able to give yourself consistent and adequate nutrition. Adequate, again, this is my nerdy dietitian brain, but adequate meaning enough energy and enough variety of energy and hydration as you're exploring a balanced relationship with exercise. If there is an imbalance in your intake or an imbalance in your hydration status, please, please, please work with your team to work on getting up to the baseline of what your body needs before we work on diving into what exercise gets to look like down the line. It's also important to remember that your energy needs change sometimes based on the type of movement or exercise that you're doing, right? My two extremes that I always use as examples is that moving your body to get up and down your stairs to do laundry has a very big difference in the energy requirements, hydration requirements, than choosing to run like an ultra marathon, right? And so we want to ensure that whichever type of movement that you want to do, you are adjusting your energy needs if necessary to be able to do that in a supportive and healthy way. And so I say all of this to say if we need to take a step back from exploring the relationship with exercise in order to stabilize your nutrition, that's actually the best self-care choice. You don't get any of the happy benefits over here if you're not doing the thing here. So that is my disclaimer as we dive into this. The other thing that feels important to say here is that this is going to be a lot of helpful tips and information. We, most people, can't do this work without the help of their full team. So as you hear these nuggets and you hear things that might resonate with you, these will be things that you get to bring into sessions with your team, into conversations with your family and supportive other, and probably not things that are going to like change overnight from hearing a lady over here talk about it. So give yourself some grace as we work on entering this process together. Okay. So first, I actually want to talk about what I mean when I say that we have a goal of compassionate movement, of having self-compassion. When we talk about what compassion is in and of itself, and I'm potentially going to butcher this definition, but we say that compassion is a sensitivity to suffering with a motivation and an attempt to alleviate it. Okay, so that means that we are in tune when we're talking about self compassion. We're in tune to when my body, my mind, my emotions, my relationships are suffering. And I have a commitment to try to reduce that level of suffering. Okay. And so what that means is that we are actually working on one, being in tune with what our body is telling us. I know that's hard for most people on this planet, not just folks that are navigating relationship with food and movement. But we're working to be a little bit kinder, offering ourselves some grace, working to like actually accept the body with its abilities and limitations as it is right now without a pressure to expedite the process, right? So, an example of this would be I'll use a personal example. I used to run. I did cross country. I ran a few half marathons, all of this great stuff. And my joints decided that that was a really poor activity for me at that time. So I took a few years to step back from that because my joints did not support it. And recently I got back into jogging and I'm quite slow and it hurts to breathe. And after going a relatively short distance, my joints hurt. That's actually hard to sit with, being someone who used to run long distances with relative ease, right? And when we talk about self compassion using this example, that would be actually recognizing, hey, you haven't run in years. You actually don't have the stamina to do what you once used to do, right? And this is really cool that I'm starting to get back into it. If my body allows me to ramp it up, that's great. If not, I can enjoy being outside and going the short distance that I'm doing now, right? And so you can hear in my language that we're working to actually appreciate ourselves and our body for what it can do, right? I'm glad I can spend time outside and go this distance that I can go rather than focusing on one, how I maybe look or feel when I run. My body feels different than it did 5, 6 years ago. I imagine everyone's does after that length of time. And on the external performance marker, right? And so when we talk about this, it's really emphasizing the process of the activity over the outcome. So what it feels like to jog that short distance, not I ran however much amount in whatever time. Okay. So when I say self-compassion, you can think of those few examples of what that might look like in terms of the relationship with exercise. And then you also heard me say being self-compassionate and being flexible. When we talk about flexibility, we actually talk about listening to your body. If you have ever been in treatment at Alsana and hopefully elsewhere, you will hear your dietitian say, what is your body telling us? because we really get to use your physical cues to inform uh, meal plan prescriptions, exercise prescriptions, all of that. And knowing that we have to listen to the body and that we're working to be fluid or flexible in terms of what we choose to do. We know that there's a balance, right? There's going to be a balance of needing to rest and needing to move, both being a form of self care. Something I like to talk about when I talk about rest is actually tweaking that word a little bit to not a little bit, a lot of it, tweaking that from rest to stillness. I think a lot of people, and maybe not a lot, but I think that people, when they think about rest, they think about physical rest. So I'm not moving my body, but maybe I am a full-time student and I'm studying all day. Or maybe I'm taking in a lot of content, whether that be social media or television shows or reading, right? My brain is consistently moving. And while it is like physically important to rest when exercise movement is a part of the process, it's equally important to mentally rest and to allow stillness and a like lack of productivity to be a part of your day. This might be a side tangent, but we know that emotional stress and emotional load takes as big of a toll on the body as physical stress and physical load. And so that's where I like to change that word rest out for stillness because I think it's a lot harder to actually be still in our mind and our bodies, to have time to like actually decompress and do nothing. So, little plug. Um, but we also need to work to be flexible with what maybe constitutes as movement or what I'm working to build into my day. We always talk, there's no right or wrong forms of exercise. The only quote unquote right type of exercise is the exercise that you like to do and that you want to do. The, I would say, only wrong form of exercise is something that you can't maintain, whether that be because you don't care about it or because you can't maintain it because you're pushing yourself further than you need to and your body can't physically keep up with it. But like I said, going up and down the stairs to do laundry, gardening, um, I don't know, even cooking, doing dishes can all be forms of movement, as can walking, jogging, etc. So again, hoping to expand the definition of movement from maybe what that small box has been as part of your history. And then, like I said, we need to pay attention to what our bodies are needing in order to be fully listening to it. And that goes on both ends of the spectrum, right? We need to work to take a break, allow for stillness, honor your body's need to repair itself. And at the same time, we need to gauge when it's appropriate to actually like push ourselves a little harder, right? For me, I can say I spent 7 hours yesterday in a car, and I spent 6 hours today in group. Um, Actually, what my body is needing is to like stretch and to probably do a little bit of yoga and maybe go on a walk outside, right? So listening on both ends of the spectrum when it's time to do something lighter or when it's time to push ourselves a little bit harder. And I want to name that takes a lot of mind body connection. Not a lot of folks are super in tune with like what exactly my body is asking for when there's some sort of signal. And so as you're navigating tuning into what your body is needing, that's something that you can work through as well. We also want to support you in connecting with your team. And I see a little typo in here, which annoys my perfectionism, but that's okay. On navigating key fears that impact your relationship with exercise. Most people, I might say everyone, has some sort of key fear that impacts what we choose to do and not do, right? I might have a fear that no one will like me if my body looks like A, B, or C. which may fuel me to exercise or not to exercise. I might have a belief that or a fear that I am undisciplined and I am lazy. That might fuel one of my exercise choices. Similar to my jogging experience, I might not want to be uncomfortable. I might not want to feel out of breath, feel, my body as it's moving, which may keep me inside instead of out. And so these are just all things that we want to be working on with our team so that we can work on our potential barriers to exercise or barriers to either rest or changing up the type of exercise we do. And I love a plug for actual slow, mindful movement practices. These can be a really great starting point for what I said earlier, learning to check in with the body about what feels good, what doesn't feel good, in a relatively slow and non-judgmental way. So when you're doing these slower things like a gentle yoga, a tai chi, a like walking meditation through the forest, you have the opportunity to understand how you feel in your body during movement. You get to pay attention to your breath, to where your mind goes, to what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and to whether or not you enjoy it. And there's actually a type of mindfulness based exercise that a colleague of mine brought to a training that I did that I love. And we're actually going to do it together. It's only going to be like 5 or 6 minutes. But it is a practice called a mudra. It is an off brand of yoga. And it is truly a mindfulness based exercise because we are going to be still seated in our chairs as you all listen to my words. And so I'm going to ask that as or if you all are comfortable, I want you to close your eyes or bring your gaze down to the floor and just follow my voice as I read this guided mudra practice. But bring yourself into comfort in whatever way that means to you. Notice your feet and if they're connected to the floor, which sidebar, a lot of times our feet can be a really great reminder that you're in the here and now. Create a sense of connection to the earth, how you're holding your hands. Explore what it feels like to soften your palms and your fingers. If you are sitting right now, I invite you to stand tall or sit tall and let go of any tenseness or rigidity you may be feeling in your back or in your shoulders. I invite you to prioritize your comfort. Notice how you're breathing. You don't have to change your breathing, by the way. Just notice the natural rhythm of it. Breathe in, breathe out. So we are actually going to work on combining the rhythm of our breath with our hand movement. So when you are ready, I invite you to wiggle your right hand, wiggle your fingers, stretch out your palm, roll your wrist, and then bring your hand to stillness. As you inhale, open your hand up to a range that works for you today. As you exhale, close your hand into a soft or a tight fist, whatever you're needing in this moment. As you inhale, open your hand. Exhale and close your hand. Inhale, open. And exhale, close. I'm going to ask you all to do that 2 more times on your own with your own pace of breath. And when you've done that 2 more times, go ahead and bring your hand to stillness. So again, breathe in and open your hand. Breathe out and close your hand. And when you're through, we're going to go through the same exercise, but with your left hand. So bring awareness to that left hand. Wiggle your fingers, stretch out your palm, roll your wrist, and then bring your left hand to stillness. As you inhale, open that hand to a comfortable range. As you exhale, close your hand into a soft or a tight fist. And as you inhale, open your hand. Exhale, close your hand. And again, I'm going to invite you to do that 2 more times at the pace of your own breath. And when you're done, bring your hand to stillness. Now we're actually going to do this with both hands at the same time. As you open your hand, breathe in, hands. And as you exhale, close your fists. Continue on for a few more breaths. And again, we have no specific outcome, nothing that we're really shooting for. We are just working to have an experience, breathing, moving our hands. And if you feel comfortable, I invite you to bring one or both hands onto your heart, gently resting them there. Perhaps you feel the sense of your breath. Same way you might place your hand on a friend's back to offer compassion and support. Let this hand be a gesture to yourself, compassion and support. Let's take one more breath in and out here. And as you all are ready, slowly open your eyes. During the end of these practices, I often need to reacclimate to my room, get a sense of the lighting, the vibes, if you will, in the space that I'm in. I am going to open my chat for a few minutes, but I am curious how this practice landed with you all in this moment today. What might have been comfortable or uncomfortable? Loved it. I hate the idea of these types of things. I'm pretty resistant because I have a hard time slowing down. But when I actually allow myself to do it and I take the third or fourth deep breath, I often think, wow, I needed this. I need to do something like this more often. Oh, wow. I am in the middle of cooking dinner and took a break to do this. I imagine those nice deep breaths would have been great to take in some of the aromas around you. And I love that. I'm good at meditating, but have never thought about it with movement. A lot of people don't. A lot of people, similar to what I said on an earlier slide, have our general buckets of what, like, quote unquote counts as movement. And we forget that, you know, the turn of our wrist, connection to our breath can be a great way to start connecting to the body. That same practice can also be really helpful as you are doing other forms of movement to help us remember to connect our breath to the ways that we're choosing to move. So that's great. Um, so, one of our goals as we do work on integrating movement is to choose a type of exercise that actually fits into your life, right? And like I said earlier, the best type of movement is the type of movement that you will do consistently. And so consistency, even if that is the practice we just did today or a few minutes of stretching, is more important than the intensity because regular and enjoyable exercise is, I'm going to make up a percentage. This is not a statistic, but it's 1,000 times better for you than overexerting your body or choosing an exercise that you'll maintain or you won't maintain or you'll only do once in a blue moon, right? And so the goal is to create some sort of practice that, like we said earlier, actually feels energizing to you and nourishes your soul, right? And so the goal for all of us is to kind of exercise shop, right? Let's explore movement options that are aligned with the things that you like to do and your interests. A silly personal example I always use is that growing up, my parents made the interesting decision to put me in 8 years of bowling camp. And silly as it may be, bowling is something I still really love to do. And so when I think about a team sport, joining a bowling league is something that interests me, but may sound really horrible to others, right? While spending time in nature or spending time in water may be more nourishing to others. So I again am going to ask y'all to maybe type in the chat, but what types of movement options align with your hobbies and interests? What types of exercise bring you joy or are aligned with your recovery needs? Riding a bike. If you are comfortable, can you share if you have a preference of indoor or outdoor biking? Dance, all types. Gentle swim and floating in the pool. I love this. I can't remember if I read aloud, but dancing in my living room. There is this song that my partner and I, every time we hear it, get up and dance together. So anytime it comes on the radio or even on a TV commercial, that is very nourishing for me. Oh, I love the idea of an e-bike that's pedal assist, but you can not have to overexert yourself if a nice hill comes along. Hiking, yoga, walking my dog. These are all lovely. I, for the walking my dog, I think that can be one of those types of movements that starts out as really nourishing and really connected. I don't know about you all, but I also know there are a lot of dog parents out there that walking the dog becomes a bit of a chore and something that's less about me and more about, getting the puppy's needs met. And so I think that can be something that we just need to be mindful of. Is this something I feel like I have to do for the well-being of my pupper, or is this something that actually fills me up? These are all great examples, though. I appreciate y'all interacting. So yes, step one is, what kind of exercise do I like? Ah, step two is actually choosing a goal. You may not have any specific outcome oriented goal other than wanting to feel good, right? And it's good to have movement goals, right? We can use my jogging example, increase my cardiovascular capacity. I potentially want to be able to see more of the outdoors. There's just like something great every once in a while about building up a sweat, right? So we are going to want to work with ourselves and with our teams to set goals that really align with your recovery. Like I said earlier, the goal is to focus on the process instead of the outcome. And so, giving an example of someone said they like to hike. A part of the process of hiking could be spending time with the people that I hike with, could be taking a real great picture for my Instagram. It could be connecting with nature around me. Those would all feel like very fulfilling, recovery oriented goals. Being the like fastest hiker up to the top of the hill and leaving my friend behind might feel like a more compulsive relationship with that, right? And so we'll really want to tease out the intention for all of the goals that we have. And we really want to focus on how the activity, how the exercise makes me feel versus any external, right? How it makes me look, how other people perceive me, how I perceive myself. The other thing that feels really important to note is that our goal for exercise can and should evolve, right? Our reason for why we choose to move may be different week to week, day to day, month to month, which means, and this is the good and cool part, but as we're in tune to what my body is needing and what my personal goal is, my type of exercise might change day to day, week to week. In addition, and I might be harping on this, so bear with me if so, but in addition to understanding what my goal is, in the moment when we are moving, we have an opportunity to get really curious, like I said earlier, about what my body's telling me. And when I know what my body is telling me, I have the opportunity to then honor what it's telling me. And all bodies have limits. So this is a like no shame thing here. And I threw a bunch of limits on here that I could think of. But when I think about the buckets of limits, I think about time limits, right? I am a responsible functioning adult in the here and now. I told you all I've been still for basically 2 days, and it's pitch black outside. That's going to put some sort of constraint on the type of activity that I am able to do in a safe way. We also have time limits with our social responsibilities, right? So maybe I have my life responsibilities, my work, talking to you all. And then I have social responsibilities, taking care of a family, meeting friends that may inhibit my ability to move. My team may also have recommendations on the amount of time that I'm exercising for, right? Most humans also have medical limits. You all heard me say earlier, my sweet joints could not keep up with the intensity of running I was putting it through. So an injury would be a type of limit, right? My how I'm feeling, illness, being under the weather. any medical complications of disordered eating, eating disorders, potentially low blood sugar. I think about physical limits. Uh, Learning something new takes a lot of time, patience, building up the intensity. We also know that, like, physically, not all bodies are capable of doing the same thing, right? We all have our own physical limitations. We may not all be in able bodies, right? Which may impact what I'm able to do or what I'm able to do safely and comfortably. And that may mean needing to seek out modifications to the type or intensity of exercise. Do you all have other limits that you think about that maybe don't fall into these categories or do and just aren't listed here? I know I'm asking y'all to participate a lot. Apologize. Okay. Ah, and lastly, just our key takeaways. So, compassionate exercise is really all about self care. Moving because it's beneficial and positive to my body and to my recovery. Resting because it's essential to my recovery and my body, right? Listening to our bodies, and focusing on enjoyment. And again, movement is a really beneficial tool when it is practiced in an intentional, flexible, mindful way. And I encourage you, I know one of y'all said, and this is a pretty common experience, that I'm afraid to exercise because something bad may happen or I may get compulsive with it. Um, and hopefully you're able to work through that with your team so that you get all of the really great benefits out of it without taking it to one extreme or the other. And my last slide for most presentations I give is this penne noodle. And they say penne for your thoughts, because I'm a dietitian and I can't get away from food puns. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if you all have any questions or comments or thoughts, I'd be happy to field or address them now.
Thanks so much, Allie. Just as you turned the slide over, someone did mention another a limit. So they mentioned mental limits, such as their eating disorder thoughts.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I also think about my own level of like stress and anxiety um, may impact what I feel capable of or willing to do, able to do. I see potentially half of the question. I'm interested, well, maybe this is a whole question. I'm interested in learning more about having a team. I'm going to give it a sec in case there's another half thought and then whole question. Got it. Thank you. Having a team. What I mean when I say that is having uh, a therapist who has experience in disordered eating, eating disorders, having a dietitian, and then as appropriate or applicable to, oh no, let me back up. Therapist with eating disorder experience, dietitian with eating disorder experience, a primary care provider, and then as needed for your individual situation, a psychiatrist or someone who may be able to handle the like medication side of things. I do also know that it's a privilege to have a full team. It costs financial resources, it costs time, resources. Um, Oftentimes people don't live in areas that actually have full team members there. And so I see the person that asked this has the full team in place with a little heart. But you may not have access to a full team, in which case we may need to piecemeal together what support does look like, knowing that, again, it is a privilege to have that whole package team in place.
Thanks, Ally. Anyone else have any other questions? We're here until 7, so feel free to drop them in the chat.
Yeah. So does meeting the client where they're at fit into this topic? Is there a way to bring about positive change behaviors when the person is struggling with compulsive exercise? So, yes, I am a like pretty firm believer that as providers or as loved ones, supportive others, it's our responsibility to do our due diligence in meeting someone where they're at. And what I would say is pending medical nutrition stability, it may actually be indicated to take a hard pause on movement to allow the body to heal. That said, if the person isn't able to take a break or they are working on like medical nutritional stability, absolutely. Something I think about when someone is struggling with compulsive exercise is tweaking or changing the routine around it. So I'm going to completely make something up, but let's pretend that our compulsive exerciser loves using their bike. Someone's example of what type of exercise they prefer. Loves using the bike, is riding for a really long time every day. We may work with that person to insert a few moments of mindfulness and of stillness or of tweaking the thing that they're doing, right? And so that might look like if you have the luxury to have an electric bike, which sounds amazing, that could be every 10 minutes, we are going to let the electric bike do its thing for 1 minute. That could be putting in a guided meditation that on your headphones that allows you to pay attention to how your legs feel in that moment, how you're breathing in that moment, what's going on around you, what do you hear, right? And working to get out of the mindset that's driving that compulsiveness. That could also be recommending the same amount of exercise, but changing it completely. So if my compulsive exercise of choice is the riding the bike, someone else said that they love swimming, right? So maybe instead of riding my bike for X amount of time, I'm going to swim for Y amount of time just to change it up and see how my body feels in that different way. So that's a long-winded answer, but yes, we can definitely meet folks where they're at and work on a most harm reduction, right? Decreasing it while increasing the amount of mindfulness. Um, okay, I subscribe to Health at Every Size. I feel like this is a but that wasn't in place here. I subscribe to Health at Every Size. I do have a hard time disconnecting movement from weight loss. I don't focus on numbers at all, but I'm aware of my body size and limits, etc. My question is, do you have any tools for uncoupling the two? I think yes. Can you give me an example of a physical limit that might be connected to the type of exercise you do that brings the mindset down the weight loss rabbit hole? I can talk if not. I just want to be as specific as I can. Okay, I will just talk. And then if you have more specifics, holler. My head goes to classic, a pretty classic journal prompt, which is if, okay, more about when I'm, okay, let me read that out loud. Not everyone can see it. It's more about when I'm exercising, I'm not focusing on the outcome of the movement. So being more outcome oriented than process. Like I was saying, my head initially goes back to this good old fashioned like homework assignment, which is if the way I moved my body absolutely would not change the way it looks and absolutely would not make me like quote unquote healthier, what would I choose to do? And I think that that can give us a nice way to step back and say, if I'm going to do something guaranteeing that it won't change my body, what would I actually enjoy? What would I want to spend my time doing? Right. And I think that can give us some context into whether or not the activity in and of itself is connected with a health outcome, right? So, using my example of jogging, if I have a belief that jogging will certainly shrink my body or make my cardiorespiratory stuff better, I'm probably going to push myself harder than I would if I was engaging in something like walking my dog, which is for my dog, right? So I think that assignment can give you a little bit of context into whether the activity itself is activating that thought or if it's something unrelated, even the act of just like moving my body, right? The other thing I like to think about is that exercise is one of those, I say funny, but I think I actually mean frustrating activities that has probably a lot of motivation happening. Wait, a lot of motivation for why I'm doing it happening at the same time. So maybe I'm riding my bike because it's super fun. I feel really cool on an e-bike. I like being outside and I do it with my friends. But I might also have a belief that it's going to shrink my body in the long run, right? And because a lot of exercise is so loaded, I think the goal is really to acknowledge like that is a thought that's there. That's not a thought that I want to have there long term. And we can actually work on increasing our awareness of the other reasons why we're choosing to move. So maybe I keep that thought, I might shrink my body long term, throw that in the back of my mind, and outwardly start talking to my friends instead, increase the relational connection. Keep that thought in the back of my mind and pay attention to all of the birds flying in the sky, right? So it's that like purposeful shifting of where your attention is at so that you're focusing on the positives and we can work through the underlying and I might shrink my body long term with your team, your whole team. I hope that was helpful. What if you really don't want to do any activity slash movement? I used to enjoy walking, but my arthritis is really bad, so I can't even enjoy that with a frown face. You are asking a question of how do I give myself permission to listen to my body? Like we said, our abilities, our interests, our enjoyment, our goals probably are going to change throughout the whole course of our life. So, one, I do want to give you permission if walking is really bad and hurts and doesn't feel comfortable, you shouldn't be walking, and that's a form of self-care in and of itself, right? And I think about, are there types of like physical therapy exercises, stretching, even the activity we did today with the hands, and I always like twisting my wrists when we do that. But are there things that I can do that are comfortable? Because we know, even I can't remember the exact number, but I believe it's as little as 10 minutes of stretching and of intentional breathing has positive mental and physical health benefits. And so I think I would encourage you, again, one, to give yourself permission. Don't do things that hurt that your body can't keep up with. And to find ways that you can incorporate gentle movement into your day so that you can still see some of those positive health outcomes. Um,
All right, Allie, I think we're at time. So thank you
okay.
so much for all the helpful tips and
Yeah,
tools.
of course.
And so we'll just end off with sharing a bit of like additional information. So if you're interested in donating to NITA, I'm including the link, and we'd also appreciate any feedback that you have on the webinar that we hosted. So please feel free to fill out the survey. Tomorrow we'll send out a recording of this webinar, so please feel free to be on the lookout. And again, thank you so much, Allie. It was such a pleasure to hear everything that you had to offer to us, and hope you all have a good evening.
Yep. Thanks for having me. See y'all later.